Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Cindy walked through the garden in frustration. She didn't like the way the trees had weathered the last frost that had suddenly hit Waterloo a few days ago. The apple trees had bloomed profusely this year and had promised to produce a bumper crop if it hadn't been for the sudden drop in temperature. Jack. She finally saw her head orchardist. Something must be done. The trees are under severe stress. The orchard mistress spoke excitedly. Cindy, only immunostimulants can help here now, the older man replied. Let's in 3 stages daily give anti-stress hormones, otherwise we will lose most of the crop. Jack was a very experienced horticulturist and agronomist in one person. He had come to work in the gardens when Cindy's step-grandfather, her stepmother's father, was still alive. He was then a young lad who had just graduated from an agricultural institute in eastern Poland, but Kevin had immediately discerned in him a future genius in planned gardening. Cindy's step-grandfather was very fond of Jack and was always encouraging the lad to experiment and discover new things, and all this did not go in vain. Jack had several patents in the field of apple growing, and more than once their orchard was at the top of the list for exporting apples overseas. The quality of their fruit was always excellent. Jack tried to develop new environmentally friendly means for growing apple trees. All their products were certified and sent to the best markets in Europe. Cindy, I want to try mixing phytohormones with that elixir we patented last year, the specialist thought. I've already tested in practice. They can work together. I like the result. I trust you completely, hugged his mistress. You are my father and grandfather in one person. I've been carrying you in my arms since you were 2 years old. Jack smiled. As I remember in the beginning, your father took you with him to work in the garden. While he was working, I carried you all over the garden. There's still a tree where I made you a swing. Cindy, I'm worried about you. We'll get the garden back to normal, but you're puffy-eyed again. Did Benjamin call again? You know, that leech thinks he can't get away from me. The woman sighed. But I've decided I'm suing him. It's about time. Jack patted her on the head. Let him know his place. He hasn't invested a dime in this place. For over 8 months now, there had been a bitter war between Cindy and her ex-husband. Benjamin had always been cunning. Neither Cindy's grandfather nor her father wanted him in the family, but the boy had used all his charm to get the not-so-pretty girl to like him. He did not give her a pass. Cindy, all the time spent in the garden with her father and stepmother, and time for guys, she did not have much time. Therefore, when the girl turned 25, she suffered from the lack of attention from guys. Benjamin appeared in her life, seemingly by accident. The young man got a job at the time of harvest. Just a few days later, he began to show interest in the stepdaughter of the mistress of the garden. At first, Cindy was in shock and did not know how to react to all this, but the guy showed such persistence that he just followed her around. Harry, Hannah said excitedly to her husband, I don't like this guy following Cindy around. You know that I love your daughter as if she were my own, but I can see that Benjamin is unreliable. I can feel in my heart that he doesn't want to be with her for love, but for our gardens. But Cindy had made her choice, and her stepmother and father would not stop her. The wedding was very big. Even distant relatives from Germany came. The first years of their life together, Benjamin pretended to be interested in gardens. He was trying to understand how the whole business worked and was always at work. Oh, that Benjamin was a pain in the ass. Complain to Hannah, Jack. He pokes his nose into everything, and when you start explaining, he won't listen. He wants the trees to grow at his whim, and he's no use to you. The man concluded. Cindy, on the other hand, was so glad that her husband was interested in gardening. She dreamed that someday they would buy their own plot of land and have a garden of their own. Her father and Hannah promised to help her with this, but her hopes were quickly dashed. One day Benjamin was away for a long time. The clock showed 3:30, and Cindy waited for her husband in the kitchen. She and Benjamin lived apart. Her father and stepmother had given them a house in a neighboring village for their wedding. The phone kept answering that the caller was unavailable. Suddenly the door creaked open and Cindy woke up. The girl herself did not notice how she put her head on her hands at the table and fell asleep. "Benjamin, where have you been?" The wife said excitedly. "Did something happen to you?" The boy felt very well. He was having fun. Cindy approached him and noticed a lipstick on his neck. "Benjamin, what does that mean?" She shouted angrily. "Are you having a mistress?" "Answer me," demanded the wife. "Why are you so boiling?" The husband said in a slurred tongue, "I just sat with friends today in the bar. I'm not a dog to be tied up at home." Cindy didn't tell her parents anything about it, but it began to happen more and more often. One day the girl couldn't stand it and told her husband that she would tell her father about everything. "Don't you dare!" He hit her in the face. "Then you'll see what I'll do to you." It wasn't that Cindy was afraid of him. She was more ashamed of her stepmother and father, who had warned her that Benjamin was an unreliable fellow. One day the girl couldn't take it anymore and told Hannah all about it. "Hannah, I can't take it anymore." Cindy burst into tears. "He has someone else. He's often out at night. Sometimes he even hits me." "Cindy, why didn't you say anything about all this?" Her stepmother asked her sternly. "I'll talk to him. We won't tell father anything yet. I'll find ways to deal with him. You need to file for divorce." A few days later, Hannah was in town. She went to the clothing market and walked into the mall. The woman was looking at a beautiful dress she wanted to buy, but suddenly she saw Benjamin on the other side of the store, accompanying some girl, whispering sweetly in her ear. "Benjamin, come here," Hannah said coldly to the guy as she approached him. "Next week, Cindy's filing for divorce. That's it, your game is over. Don't even think about blackmailing her." "We'll see about that," he shouted after her. "Screw you." Hannah spent the whole evening thinking about how to tell Harry, her husband. Finally, she decided to have a serious talk with him tomorrow afternoon. In the morning, they had to go to a company to see the partners. It was April. Rain was lightly dripping, and Hannah and her husband got into the car. They wanted to get things done before lunch and then drive to the garden. On this day, Hannah was driving. It was obvious that the woman was very worried. "Hannah, what's wrong?" Her husband asked her thoughtfully. "Are you not feeling well?" "No, I'm fine," she sighed. "Could we stay home for a couple hours this afternoon? I'm a little tired." Hannah drove quietly along the highway, and everything was going well until they came to a section that went over a hill. The woman accelerated up the hill so that she could drive up it without any problems, but when the car reached the highest point, it started to roll downhill at full speed. "Oh, shit!" screamed Hannah. "Something's happened to the brakes. Harry, I can't control the steering." Those were her last words. The car rolled down the hill and accelerated very fast. It smashed through the fence and into the ravine. For 300 meters, the car spun around, going up in the air and hitting the ground. By the time it reached the river at the bottom of the hill, the car was practically ashes. "Cindy, but you have me." Benjamin reassured his wife. "Don't worry, I'll never leave you. We'll get through this tragedy together." Cindy was 28 at the time, and she was all alone. Apart from Benjamin, she really had no one, and Uncle Jack supported her as best he could. The girl had to come to her senses very quickly. A new season was beginning. The garden could not be started. She had inherited all the gardens of her stepmother, who, a few years ago, had written a will on the subject. Despite the fact that the girl had worked with her parents in the garden for many years to act on her own, in the beginning it was very difficult for her. According to the remains we found, your stepmother failed to drive. A police officer told Cindy at the time. It's very hard to say what caused it. The car just crumpled into small particles like sand. But even so, we will still investigate. For the first year after the tragedy, Benjamin settled down. He slept at home all the time, managed the garden, and tried to help Cindy in any way he could. "Cindy, I don't like this." Uncle Jack warned her one day. "I can smell something in that bastard's mind." "Jack, I don't know," she sighed. "Benjamin has changed a lot lately. He's been supporting me in everything, and he's been doing a lot of gardening." The man only shook his head. He loved the girl and wished her only happiness, but then he had no evidence against her husband. Benjamin endured exactly 1 year, and then everything started again, but this time he became bolder and began to behave even more freely. There was no one else to protect Cindy from him. First he insulted her drunkenly, then he raised his hand, but one very important incident put an end to their relationship. Cindy urgently needed to go to the city on business. There she had an appointment. She was late and rushed on all sails, in the cafe waiting for her representative. The meeting went very well. A baby food company wanted to buy a good amount of apples this year. The girl said goodbye to the man and decided to sit in the cafe for a while longer. Suddenly her gaze fell on the window. Benjamin was walking along the street with a pregnant girl. From the way he held her hand, they were more than acquaintances. "Benjamin?" Cindy said to her husband in the evening. "I'm giving you exactly 24 hours to get out of my house. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." "Cindy, what are you doing?" He was surprised. "What did I do?" "I love you so much. I think you're not the only one." She looked coldly at her husband. "That pregnant girl, apparently, you love more than me." "Which one?" Benjamin played the wife. "Cindy, what are you imagining?" But it didn't help, and the guy became furious. He grabbed something from the table and ran up to his wife. Cindy didn't move. "Listen, Benjamin, either you leave this house with your feet, or I'll report you to the police, and you'll go to jail," she said coldly. "You are." The guy yelled at the top of his voice, but he could not beat his wife that day. Benjamin shouted for a long time, then grabbed his things and ran out of the house. From that day on, he never came to Cindy's house again. They only met in court, and Benjamin constantly terrorized her on the phone. The woman and the head gardener strolled along the apple alleys. They were looking at which varieties had reacted most to the cold temperatures. "That's what I thought. Gloucester was the hardest hit. Considered the jack plant. We'll need to up the dosage for those." "All right, let's start at lunchtime then," said the landlady. "The forecast is for a couple more hours of drizzle before lunch and then sunshine. Cindy, we'll need to do a second treatment during the evening dew point." The man looked at her. "That's when the auricles in the leaves open up and the phytohormones are absorbed in greater quantities. Do you have enough of everything, or do you need to buy something else?" The woman asked thoughtfully. "Do you have all the biologics?" "Yes, I checked everything." The head gardener replied. "Cindy, order some Japanese medicine or something based on cedar and pine. They will help us a lot right now, too." It took almost 3 days for the trees to come around again. Some did lose color, but many recovered from the shock. "I don't think that's a problem." Jack cheered up the landlady. "They'll have big apples this year, so you'll be able to sell them for more money." Cindy would come home happy. Of course, at the age of 30, it was very difficult for a young woman to take charge of an orchard of this size, but many years of experience in the orchard had not passed without a trace. Cindy was no longer so hurt by the way her husband had treated her. She saw very clearly now that Benjamin had never loved her, and in all likelihood, it was his plan to marry Cindy and then take everything away from her. The woman was completely immersed in her work. She didn't want to think about her personal life now. But still in the evenings there was such a longing that the loneliness brought tears to her eyes. Cindy ate dinner and tangled herself in her plaid, drinking hot tea with pleasure. She didn't want to think about anything, but the silence was suddenly interrupted by the phone. "Cindy, darling," someone spoke into the receiver. "Why won't you talk to me?" "Benjamin, don't even think about this nonsense." The woman replied coldly. "You'll wait till I report you to the police." "You can't do this to me." "The man wouldn't stop. You left me with nothing." "And what did you expect?" She laughed. "You can complain to the International Court. You won't get a dime from me." Last September, Cindy was finally able to divorce Benjamin. The court ruling left him with nothing. This, of course, did not suit him, and the man has been on her nerves for more than 6 months. Benjamin tried a variety of methods. Then he kept confessing love to Cindy, then threatened her, but the woman to all this remained indifferent. "Okay, you don't want to do it the easy way." He yelled into the phone. "So I'll meet you in court. This time I will succeed. Half of your business belongs to me." "Why not all of it?" The woman laughed. "Benjamin, if the law was on your side, you'd have gotten your share by now, but alas, you came into my house in your tattered underpants and you left in them. That's it, I'm not talking to you anymore." "Yeah, fuck you." The ex-husband scolded, but Cindy had already hung up, so Benjamin talked to himself for about 5 minutes. "I'm so sick of you." Cindy scolded aloud. "You never amounted to anything, but you always wanted to be king. Who will listen to you in court?" "You idiot. It's a good thing you're out of my life." The woman had already let Benjamin out of her life, so much that she even began to feel disgusted with him. She felt sorry for the lost time and effort, but as they say, we have to go through something in life, so she just accepted it. A couple more months went by, and the owner and her head gardener were convinced that their labors had not been wasted. "Cindy, look at these." Jack happily pointed to a load of beautiful apples. "They'll be perfect for July." "How grateful I am to you." The woman hugged him. "What would I do without you?" "Thank you for being here." "What's wrong, daughter?" He stroked her head. "I didn't do it alone. We all did it together. You know, Cindy, I've worked for you for so many years, but not your step-grandfather, not your stepmother, not your father, never hurt a single person. Matthew made that rule. No yelling at the workers. Everything was always resolved through polite conversation. I've never had a master like you, and your father, Harry, after he married Hannah, never raised his voice to anyone. He continued to work as a laborer for a long time." The man wept. Cindy hugged him even tighter. In essence, she had no one else in her family except Jack. Time passed quickly, and it was harvest time. The head gardener was very pleased with the result this year. Despite the April frost, the trees came to life very quickly and produced not only tasty, but also large fruits. Look at that! Jack couldn't get enough of them. They are all from 90 millimeters in diameter and more, in those boxes in general 12, 15 centimeters, and such beautiful fruits. Yes, especially those with a pink side, just beautiful. Rejoice together with the agronomist hostess. This year we actually have a very good harvest. It had been a busy time. The season had not given us a chance to rest. Cindy disappeared in her orchards until late at night, while the apple loading was going on. This year, the pears had also yielded well. Not so many, but a contract had already been signed for them. In general, the orchard was bustling. One Sunday evening, Cindy arrived home a little early. Her fatigue was wearing her down. In the morning, Benjamin called again, bidding for her. The woman, tired, sat down on the sofa, tried to put her thoughts in order. Suddenly her phone rang. Some unfamiliar number popped up. "Is it Cindy?" Someone asked in Italian. "Yes," a woman answered. "What do you want?" She had a strong accent. "My name is Matthew. I'm a lawyer." The man replied, "I'm sorry to bother you, but I really need your help." "A lawyer?" Cindy asked him again, "But I'm listening." "Is there some problem with the shipments to Italy?" She was surprised. "Supply problems?" The lawyer didn't understand. "I'm calling you on a personal matter. You see, your father had an older sister, Lucy, in Italy. I don't know if you've been in touch all this time or not, but she died a few years ago, leaving 2 children. They hired me to handle the estate. I'm sorry, but what does that have to do with me?" Cindy was surprised. "I have no claim to any of their property. It's not about you." Matthew tried to explain the situation. "You see, your father has a house in Italy. As far as I know, your father died. I'm sorry for your loss. Now your cousin and sister would like to ask you, if you don't want to inherit it, could you give it to them?" "My father's old house?" Cindy asked. "Yes, of course. I don't want it, so they can have it." "Cindy, according to our laws, you will have to formally either inherit it yourself or renounce it." The man explained. "Otherwise, this house will just hang around like that. Could you come to Italy for a few days?" "Oh," the woman sighed. "I'm sorry, but now I cannot exactly. We have a season, and you can do it on the internet or through the mail?" "Unfortunately, no," replied the lawyer. "It will require your personal presence." "That would be a big problem for me." The woman said, "All right, give me some time, I'll think about it. I'll call you back on this number in a few days." Cindy was shocked by this news. First of all, her father had never told her that he had a sister. Secondly, the woman was not prepared for some sort of family connection in Italy. She considered herself a true American and didn't even want to, at least, look up anything about how her father had lived years ago. "Cindy, why don't we push this thing to the end of August?" Jack advised her. "It will be easier for me to handle it there, and you can go to Italy for a few days." "You know, I don't want to go there." She looked at him pleadingly. "I have enough problems with Benjamin here, and there will be relatives there who will probably want to keep in touch with me." "But you don't have to tell them you have gardens, do you?" The man looked at her. "Let them think you're starving. Harry was a good man, and the fact that he didn't tell you about your aunt was no accident. He had a good reason. He didn't talk about his past life at all, as you know. Maybe Hannah knew something about it. She was very fond of him." "You're probably right," Cindy agreed. "He had a reason for not telling me anything about Italy. All I know is that my father loved me very much, and what happened to him back home is of no consequence to me." By the end of August, Cindy had made a visa for Italy. The woman decided to drive to Verona in her car. "Jack, I'll feel so safe there." She said to the gardener, "Not that I don't speak Italian well, but asking someone for directions all the time, with my strong accent, I won't be able to. You'd probably have to drive about 20 hours. The man figured it out. I can manage." Cindy smiled. "I'll spend the night in a hotel, and call me if you need anything. I'll be in touch all the time." The only thing is, I don't know how it will be in Italy, but I'd better solve this case at once, otherwise they will terrorize me with this house for years. So I'll give it up right away. The weather was good. It was Cindy's first such long journey. The woman realized that it would not be easy for her on the road, but she was especially afraid of what might happen to her in Italy, and in general, she had never been interested in this country. It seemed to her a completely unknown zone. Probably, except that Rome was the capital of Italy, Cindy knew nothing else. I'll manage somehow, she encouraged herself. I'm only going there for a few days, and I'm not going to stay there. As soon as the woman crossed the border, she immediately felt a huge difference. This must be the Italian roads, she said in shock. You have to be very careful not to hit all these potholes. Finally, Cindy saw a large sign. She read the name and got excited. Verona, she sighed. Here I am. I hope they don't stop me at every corner now that I have someone else's license plate. But as soon as Cindy entered the city, she was immediately stopped by the police. As usual, they were standing in the most unexpected places. What are they doing here? The woman said in shock. Can they stand here? But in Italy, anything was possible, as Cindy found out over the next few days. Why did you come to us? The police officer looked at the documents with interest. I have business here. Cindy answered. I was called here by your lawyer. We're dealing with an inheritance issue. She tried to explain. The man finished examining the documents, checked the visa, but Cindy still did not let go. Was there something else? She was surprised. I have no problem with the documents. The man in uniform stared at her. The woman understood nothing. Come on, leave her alone, whispered in his ear partner. Or she may have some connections. We'll create problems for ourselves. The police officer hesitated for a while, but then handed the documents to her. Welcome to Verona. May you succeed in all your endeavors. Cindy's lawyer told her to drive down Verona's main street. She needed to get to the main square, and he would be waiting for her there. The woman slowly followed the navigator towards her final destination. As soon as she parked, Matthew found her immediately. Hello, Cindy. He extended his hand to her. I'm Matthew Clark, the lawyer. Hello, Matthew. The woman greeted him. It's very nice to see you. They got into the lawyer's car and drove to the notary, where Cindy's relatives were supposed to be waiting for them. Where are they? The lawyer was nervous when he and Cindy had been waiting for half an hour. I'll call them now. The man quickly pulled out his phone. It was obvious he was very worried. Paul, where are you? He asked dryly. We are already waiting for you. How come you haven't left yet? Let's hurry up. It's in your best interest. The lawyer hung up the phone and wiped the sweat from his face. They waited for almost 2 hours when finally, near the notary, a cab stopped and a man and a woman got out of it. Cindy immediately realized that they were drunk. Shall we go? Paul, who looked to be about 40 years old, said in a cheerful voice. Because of you, we missed the appointed time. Now we have to wait again until the notary calls us. The lawyer said unhappily. That's fine. The man replied in a slurred voice. We'll talk to our sister then. He took Cindy by the arm and led her away, his breath so strong that the woman felt nauseous. Well, sister, said the cousin, it is not customary to offend our relatives. What do you want? Cindy was surprised. You're already getting a house as a present from me. Well, a house is a house, but we need some money. He looked at her sternly. We don't live rich abroad, so we should have a conscience. Cindy was shocked. She didn't even know what to say. She wanted to say everything to the drunkard's face, turn around and leave, when the door of the notary's office opened, and they were called. Cursing herself for having come here at all, the woman went to get a lawyer. By 1 o'clock tomorrow, everything will be ready. Finally, the notary said, and they left his office. Paul brazenly headed for his sister, but Matthew quickly shoved the woman into the car and shouted, "See you tomorrow." They drove off. What was that? Cindy said in shock, "He was demanding money from me. You'll have to forgive me." With guilt, the lawyer told her. "When I started this case, a man asked me for it. We met with him and your cousin a few times, and everything was going fine. But then they both went on a bender, and it was after I called you. I didn't really know what to do. Just realizing how our system works, you would have had a shake-up with the house from time to time anyway, since you paid for your father all the debts he had accumulated over time. There are no claims against you now. I hope tomorrow, when we finish all the business, I never see them again." The woman could not come to her senses. "No," he answered briefly, "and I hope never to meet them again. They turned out to be the truest of alkies. What business could there be with them?" Cindy sat in silence until they walked back to her car. The woman was so stunned by what had happened to her that she found it hard to believe it all. The next day, the lawyer and Cindy were waiting for the new owners of the house at the notary's office. The man and woman had not yet sobered up. They had probably been celebrating the case all night. Paul gave Cindy a displeased look. After about 20 minutes, all the documents were signed, and they all went outside together. The man headed decisively towards his cousin, but he was again blocked by the lawyer. "Well, Paul, how will you pay for the work?" he asked. The man was confused. He didn't think he would have to pay at all. "Why, do I owe you something?" He looked at Matthew defiantly. "Why would you?" "I did all the work from start to finish." The lawyer replied calmly, "You own the house, don't you?" "We are, which means I've done my job." "Fuck you." He cursed his Paul and, making the hand sign to his sister, quickly jumped into the car that was waiting for them. "Didn't they pay you for the work?" Cindy asked in horror. "Oh my God, how could that be?" "And we can do anything," Matthew said with annoyance in his voice. "You can't help people after that. I spent so much time and effort to help them. Well, God will judge them. Let's go." Cindy could not understand why these people could do that to a lawyer. "Matthew," she said when they got out of his car, "this is my case, too. May I thank you for your work?" She handed him a 500 euros piece of paper. "No, that's too much." The man objected. "And besides, you don't have to take responsibility for their actions." "You know, thanks to you, I now know that there are good people in Italy." Cindy smiled. "Let this be for you from me." Matthew stood looking at Cindy with a puzzled look. He still had the money in his hands and didn't know what to say. "Cindy, thank you very much," shouted he. When the woman was already getting into her car, she waved to him kindly and turned the key. Cindy felt a great relief that all her business in Italy was now over. "Thank goodness for home," she said to herself. "I'll just stop by the hotel to pick up my things." Cindy tried to concentrate on the road, but she couldn't get what had happened to her out of her head. Her vacation in Italy had turned out to be so short, but so eventful, that the woman's head was boiling from it all. She was driving down the street where her hotel was located. A traffic light showed, and beyond it Cindy had to turn. The woman wanted to pass quickly, but the red light came on abruptly. She stood waiting for the light to turn green. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a man started knocking on her window, shouting something loudly and waving his arms. The light turned green and Cindy drove off. After about 10 meters, she turned towards the hotel, but suddenly the same man was still in front of her. He jumped out into the road and Cindy hit the brakes as hard as she could. "What the hell?" she cursed, taking off her seatbelt. "Are they all crazy around here?" She quickly ran outside. There was a man lying in front of the car. He was conscious. The man tried to get up, but his left leg was bruised. "Why did you do that?" Cindy said through her tears. "What do you want from me?" The man was wandering along the center aisle of the city cemetery. Today was the anniversary of his wife's death. In fact, his meeting with Lara had happened by chance. "Like a bird that flew into my house unexpectedly, she also jumped out of it unexpectedly," he sighed. Jordan was the son of a very rich man. His grandfather was a member of the party, and after the scandal, he managed to snatch the whole steel plant. The latter had been inherited by his father, but Davis Jr. didn't want to continue his father's business. After his death, his son sold the mill and started making natural juices. So, this business went so well that in a few years, Jordan became one of the leading producers in Italy and CIS countries. As usually happens, the first marriage of such rich people rarely happens happy, and so it happened in the life of Davis. The first time he chose as his wife the first beauty of Verona, the model Monica Jones. Then the man was 32 years old and the girl 21. They lived from the very beginning very badly. Monica was not interested, neither Jordan nor family life. The girl preferred to spend her time in beauty salons and resorts abroad. Monica, her husband once told her, "You and I live like strangers. You have to think of your family somehow." "Jordan, what don't you like?" She was surprised. "I have my own blog, social media. I'm in front of people all the time. Do you think I'm going to give up everything and give birth to your children?" She was indignant. Her husband that time did not answer her anything, but decided to wait some more time, and after 2 years, the man could not stand it any longer and filed for divorce. "Monica, I suggest we part ways peacefully." Davis suggested it. "You will receive from me in the divorce some compensation for spending 4 years of your life on me, but do not count on more." The girl did not answer anything, but after the divorce, she arranged on her ex-husband a real bullying on social networks. Monica gladly gave interviews and told how unfairly treated her Davis. "So that I once again at least once contacted some model or daughter of rich people." Jordan was angry. It would never happen. Many years passed, and the man remained alone. He was completely immersed in his work, and Davis would probably have remained a bachelor for the rest of his life if it hadn't been for one incident. Once Jordan was in a hurry to a very important meeting. His driver warned him that they had to stop at a gas station. Davis got out of the car and was discussing something on the phone. A young woman came to their car and started filling the tank with gasoline. The driver went to pay for the gas when the owner was waiting outside. "Well, that's it." In a beautiful voice said the young woman, "You have a full tank." "Thank you." The man thanked her. "You have a responsible job. You have to be very careful." "Yes," said the stranger. "But I'm used to it. Night shifts are hard, but thank God I have a job like this." The smile so transformed the girl's face that it became incredibly beautiful. Jordan. Unexpectedly, Davis extended his hand to the girl. "Let's get acquainted, Lara." She shook his hand with a smile. "Nice to meet you too." Davis was busy with a lot of new contracts. Probably 2 weeks later, the man suddenly remembered the girl who worked at the gas station. It was Sunday, and he got into his car. "Lara will be working tomorrow." The gas station attendant answered him. "Today is her day off." "Why did I even come here?" Jordan berated himself. "I'm a well-known man in my town. I'm 42 years old, and I came to a gas station to look for Lara. But the next day, Despite his busy schedule, he asked his driver to take him to the gas station. "Lara, I came to see you yesterday," Davis told the girl, "but I was told that you have the day off. I'd like to invite you to a cafe. Would you mind?" "Me?" She sounded scared. "I'm sorry, but I can't." "I'm sorry, but I have a husband." Jordan felt extremely ashamed. He apologized to the girl and decided not to mention her again. It was probably a month later when he and his driver stopped at a gas station. Davis looked at Lara in shock. Her entire face was bruised. "Lara, what happened to you?" The man couldn't take it anymore. "Did someone beat you up?" "No, I accidentally fell." Lowering her eyes, the girl answered, "It will soon pass." Jordan didn't know what to do. He headed towards the cash register. "Tell me, what about your employee?" he said calmly. "She said she fell, but it didn't look like it." "Yes, her husband is a complete idiot," angrily replied the older woman. "She falls so often, and how does she even live with him?" "Why doesn't Lara report him to the police?" The stranger persisted. "He'll kill her someday. Who would want her?" The cashier sighed. "She has no relatives. Her mother is a drunk, and her daughter gave her daughter to this man for a bottle." "How's that?" Davis asked in shock. "And where did the guardianship authorities look? Who would look after them all?" The woman was indignant. "Do they think about the children?" Lara was not 18 years old when her mother was hungover and had no money for a bottle, so she gave the girl to a man for a drink. Jordan turned pale at the woman's words. His heart was pounding frantically. He turned and walked towards Lara with a determined step. "Lara, we need to have a serious talk with you," the man said sternly. "Yes, perhaps I have no right to interfere in your affairs, but still, who beat you?" "My husband." The girl burst into tears. "If you only knew how tired I am of all this." "Is he officially married to you?" Davis asked calmly. "Or is he just your roommate?" "I have nowhere else to live, so I live with him," the girl answered. "Many years ago my mother died. She burned down with our house. I was left alone. My mother gave me to Eric as a wife. So what time will you finish work today?" Jordan asked. "I'll send a man to pick you up. Do you have your papers with you?" "Yes," she answered quietly. "I'm sorry, I don't know you at all. I'm afraid of everything," Lara cried. "Don't be afraid," sighed the man. "Trust me, you won't go back to Eric. I'll buy you all the things you need. I need a housekeeper now, and I'll pay you well." It was obvious that the girl was very afraid, but she decided to get into the car that came to pick her up in the evening. "This is where your room will be," showed the owner of the house. "I have asked that you bring all the necessary things and uniforms. This weekend, you'll be completely free. You can do whatever you want. I have a separate person for the weekends, so don't think you will have to work all the time." It was very difficult for Lara at first. She was constantly afraid that her husband would come after her, but this problem was immediately solved by Davis. He went with his guys to the address given to him by the gas station cashier. Eric turned out to be a man about 55 years old. He was drunk. Jordan talked to him and warned him not to look for Lara again. From that day on, Eric forgot all about her. Lara had a hard time getting used to her new life. She had been living in fear for many years, so it took her a long time to see that the owner of the house had no evil intentions towards her. Almost 2 years had passed and Lara was 29 years old when the girl realized that she had fallen in love with her master. In fact, Jordan, Lara had been in love for a long time, but he realized that with such a traumatized psyche, she needed enough time until the girl started to trust people again. His sincere love helped Lara to come to her senses, and they played a modest wedding. Davis loved his wife very much, and how happy was the news that Lara was expecting a child. "Lara, my love, thank you," he said to his wife all the time. "You have made me the happiest man in the world." Lara was happy herself. Not only did she have a husband she loved, but now they would have a daughter. Everyone lived in anticipation of a baby girl, but one day Davis' phone rang. "Jordan, here's the thing. It's Lara's doctor. Your wife has a very rare condition. If she continues with the pregnancy, Lara could die." Davis asked in shock, "She won't be able to carry the baby?" "I'm sorry, but you have a very difficult choice to make." The doctor sighed with frustration in his voice. "Either your wife terminates the pregnancy in the 7th month and never gets pregnant again, or she gives birth. But I have no guarantee that she will survive the birth." Davis spent days just sobbing. He didn't know how to tell his wife. Finally, Lara couldn't take it anymore and started talking to her husband. "Jordan, what's going on?" she asked him. "You haven't seen your face for the last day. Is it something at work?" "Lara, you know." He tried to find the right words. "My darling, my love, I don't even know how to tell you." "Jordan, tell it like it is," the woman sternly ordered. "I'll try to understand you." "Lara, you have a very rare disease." Davis burst into tears. "We don't have much time. Either you get an abortion and stay alive, or the baby will survive, but you may die during labor." The woman turned pale. She was silent for a while, stood up, walked to the window. "I will give birth. This is my final decision," she said and left the office. As Davis was not prepared for the fact that his wife would die, her death was a real tragedy for him. The baby girl was born perfectly healthy. Her father loved her very much, but the loss of his wife did not pass for him without a trace. He longed for Lara very much. The first months, the man just disappeared at the cemetery, but then gradually, he began to be dragged down by business, and he gave himself a promise that he would spend as much time as possible with his daughter. It was exactly a year after Lara died. Davis spent more than an hour at his wife's grave. He let his driver go. He was in so much pain that he wanted to walk a little bit so the movement would cheer him up. The man left the cemetery, got on a bus, and made his way downtown. It was bustling. Davis really wanted to get lost among people. He looked as if through passers-by. He was not interested in anything at that moment. He just wanted to forget about everything for a while. He slowly walked along the sidewalk along the street. He didn't even look under his feet. Suddenly his gaze fell on a traffic light. He came up to it and noticed some car next to him. Instinctively, Davis looked into it. He stared blankly at the woman, but after a moment, he felt as if he'd been doused with boiling water. The man quickly ran to the door and looked at the driver carefully. "Lara?" He shouted in shock. "Lara, what are you doing here?" "Lara, wait," waved Jordan as the light turned green and the car drove forward. Davis rushed after her. He saw the car turn sideways. He sped up and ran out to meet her. A few seconds later, he felt a blow to his left leg, and Jordan fell to the asphalt from the pain. A minute later, a woman jumped out of the car. She was shouting something in some language. It was similar to English, but Davis didn't understand any of her words. "Lara, what's going on?" Finally, he got up. "Lara, it's me, your husband." "Jesus, what on earth is going on here?" With a strong accent said the stranger. "Are you out of your mind? Why did you throw yourself in front of my car?" "I'm not Lara. My name is Cindy." "No way," Davis said in shock. "Lara, why did you make this whole show?" Did you get the doctor to fake your death in childbirth? But why? I loved you so much. I don't know how I survived your death. Man, I'm telling you again, my name is Cindy, and I hope this was my first and last trip to Italy. God, how can you even live here? She was swearing in English. Jordan was in such stress and bewilderment that when he took one step, he immediately fell down. First you throw yourself under my car, and now you want to pretend that you feel bad? A stranger approached him. Is this your business here? Is this how you make your money? You know what? She took out her wallet and took out 200 euros. Take it and leave me alone. I don't want your money. Davis could barely speak. Lara, help me please, can you take me home? I'm tired of telling you that I'm not Lara. Cindy tried one last time to tell him. Come on, get in my car. The woman helped Jordan into the car and threw a belt on him and drove according to his instructions. What kind of day is this? The stranger was cursing all the way, in a language Davis didn't understand. When am I going to get out of here? Lara, don't you remember me? I kept saying Jordan. What about our daughter? Do you remember Amelia? A respectable man. Cindy looked at him angrily. I have no children, and fortunately no husband either. Tell me, how much longer do you think we have to travel? I have to leave Italy today. It's still probably an hour and a half to our house. Quietly replied Davis. The man couldn't come to his senses. Everything was mixed up in his head. Oh shit! The stranger cursed. I'm going to be stuck here for another night. The driver and passenger were silent, each thinking about something else. Davis was thinking about how he could lure Lara into his house. The man was sure that when she saw their daughter, she wouldn't be able to play tricks on him anymore. The woman, however, lamented that she would have to spend another night in Italy. Lara, can I ask you a favor? Jordan looked at the woman. Let this be my last request. Please share dinner with me tonight, and then you can go wherever you want. Cindy looked at him in horror. It seemed to her that there was a catch to all of this at all. Maybe he organized for me to be kidnapped, she thought. And then for ransom, will Jack blackmail me? But when the woman drove up to the Davis house, she was very much surprised. Only someone with decent money could live here. Do you live here? The stranger asked in amazement. What a huge house. Yes. Jordan answered briefly. I beg you to help me into the house. I'll call a doctor to examine my leg, and then we'll have dinner. I promise I won't keep you any longer after that. The woman hesitated. She was very frightened by everything that was happening. Finally, Cindy agreed and drove up to the unfamiliar house. She helped him out of the car. Some man immediately ran up to her. He looked at Cindy in horror, but didn't say anything to her. Matthew, help me to my room, his host asked him. I fell and hurt my leg. The man turned back now and then and regarded the stranger with undisguised fear. Finally, the whole procession went up to the second floor, and Matthew put his master on the bed. Jordan took out his cell phone and immediately called. Bob, please come to my place. Said he to someone / I fell and hurt my leg badly. Yes, at my house. Thank you. The landlord hung up the phone. Did he see how shocked his domestic worker was? He kept glancing at Cindy. Matthew, please show our guest to Amelia's room, said Jordan. I'll wait for the doctor. Can you wait for me at the baby's room? He turned to Cindy. The woman could not understand what was going on, but decided to follow Matthew, who led her to some children's room. The man looked back at the woman and his face was pale. Cindy didn't really look where they were going. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that for a split second she couldn't even remember where she was. Finally, The man stopped at a door and opened it. A young woman with a small child appeared on the threshold. It was clear from her pink blouse that she was holding a baby girl. The girl looked at her guest in horror and recoiled. Cindy first cast a general glance around the room, then looked intently at the child. No special emotion was evoked in her. The governess had moved away from the woman and was standing somewhere in the far corner. The woman walked around the room. It was in the traditional style for small children. Cindy was about to leave the room and go downstairs to the living room to wait for the master of the house there, when suddenly her gaze fell on the pictures. They adorned almost the entire wall, but at first they seemed to the woman to be just decorations. "Who is that?" she asked aloud. "Who is this woman?" She turned toward the governess. "It's Amelia's mother." In a trembling voice, the girl answered. Her name was Lara. Cindy stared intently at the face she saw in the photograph. After a few seconds, a chill ran down her spine. The woman jumped up. She dropped her bag from her hands in surprise. "Where is she?" Cindy struggled to speak. "Can I talk to her?" "No," the governess replied briefly. "Exactly a year ago, she died in childbirth." "God, I can't understand anything." Cindy said in shock in English, "This woman looks a lot like me. Maybe I'm imagining all this. I'm just very tired today. I'm stressed out from Italy." The woman began to look at the rest of the pictures. They showed the man who had thrown himself in front of her car today, a woman who looked like Cindy, and a little girl. Apparently, it was the baby the girl was now holding in her arms. There was a rustle of some sort, and the same man who had accompanied Cindy here appeared in the doorway. He eyed the guest with interest, but she was completely indifferent to everything. "Jordan asked you to come down to the dining room," he said quietly. Jordan interrupted the woman. "Who is that? Is this the owner of this house?" The man nodded his head to her, and she followed him the whole time, looking back at the pictures that hung on the wall. Cindy waited for the man for about half an hour. She heard some voices in the hallway, a familiar voice thanking someone, and heard a door slam shut. A few minutes later, the master of the house himself showed up in the dining room. "Well, that's all right." He smiled. "The doctor said it was just a bad bruise. That woman in the pictures in the baby's room, is that your wife?" Cindy asked him. "Yes," he answered briefly. "Her name was Lara. Amelia is our long-awaited daughter. Didn't the sight of our little girl make your heart ache?" I burst into tears, Jordan. "I thought you couldn't resist meeting our daughter." "Lara, I love you. Can you understand that?" "Jordan," sighed the guest, "I can indeed confirm that I am very much like your wife, but I am not Lara. I have been living in America since I was 2 years old. This is the first time in my life that I've come to Italy on business, and I'll be honest with you, I'm in complete shock. I don't know how I can explain to you why I look like the woman I saw in the picture, but I can prove to you that my name is James Cindy. I'll call my lawyer. He can confirm it for you. I'm sorry to dash your hopes, but that's the way it is." The landlord looked at the woman with an uncomprehending stare. It was obvious that he refused to believe what Cindy was saying. He remained silent for a while, tears streaming down his cheeks. Suddenly his gaze cleared, and he looked at his guest carefully. "But there is no such resemblance in nature," the man said. "Yes, it may be so that people have some similarities, but to be so it is simply impossible. And this can only mean one thing. You are somehow connected with my wife." "That's out of the question." Cindy understood him. "At least according to the information I have no brothers or sisters. Are you sure about that?" Jordan looked at her intently. "What do you know about yourself?" "I mean before you came to America. As my father used to say, my mother died shortly before he moved. A woman started it. Naturally, I don't remember her. My father decided to radically change his life. Of course, he took a risk. I still do not understand how he decided to come to a foreign country with a small child. But I'll tell you the truth. My father said almost nothing about Italy. And I didn't take much interest in it myself. It turns out that your father, according to him, left Italy to earn money after his wife died. Davis reasoned. But for some reason he didn't tell you anything about it. Didn't your father want to come home? Suddenly the landlord asked. Never. The woman answered briefly. For as long as I can remember, it was out of the question. My father somehow persuaded my step-grandfather Matthew to take the first job from me. I grew up in gardens, you might say. While Dad worked, I rode in the arms, then the owner, then the head gardener, Uncle Jack, who always loved me. Grandpa was a strict man, but he treated my dad like a son. Dad always worked honestly, never drank or smoked. He was loved for his kindness and responsibility. Maybe that's why the garden owner's daughter Hannah fell in love with him. My stepmother was 10 years older than my dad, but that was never a barrier for them. I'd say they had a perfect relationship, and Hannah was always very good to me. I found in her not only maternal care, but also friendly love. Okay, Jordan thought with effort. If your father didn't like to reminisce about Italy, then there must have been something there that repulsed him. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend you or your mother in any way, but it's strange that your father had no desire to visit her grave. Could it be that he didn't love her? It's hard for me to say, Cindy sighed. Perhaps he did. Once, when I was about 15, I wanted to talk to my father about it. Dad, I said, you could tell me about my mother. I miss her very much. He turned pale then. It was obvious he didn't know what to say. He paced back and forth nervously. Cindy. Finally, he said, your mother was a good person, but there is nothing more I can tell you, and I beg you never to ask me about it. It's all very strange, Davis concluded. It turns out that your father had some secret connected with Italy. What if your mother isn't dead? The man suddenly suggested. And an even bolder assumption. You were not hers alone. You had a twin sister. Perhaps more siblings. I don't know. Shocked, Cindy replied. This whole thing scares me so much, I'm starting to doubt everything. It's just that if it was really so, you could have close relatives in Italy, and she could be my wife. Jordan said in astonishment, I'm already dizzy from all this. The woman said tiredly, My God, I don't understand anything anymore. All right, I suggest you stay with me tonight. With a smile said the owner of the house, and tomorrow morning we'll be seen, and now let's have dinner, or I'll go crazy from excitement. The host and his guest finished their dinner in silence. Cindy first decided to get herself a room in a hotel, but something inside her insisted on staying in this stranger's house. To her surprise, she slept through the night without a backward glance. Jesus! She looked at the clock in horror when she woke up. 10 hours? I haven't felt like this in a long time. Yesterday was such a busy day that I just overslept. The guest got dressed and went down to the living room, but no one was there. The sun was shining happily outside the window, and Cindy went out into the yard. She spotted the flower beds and trees and went to them. She closed her eyes and enjoyed the late scent of roses. Good morning, she heard someone's voice. How did you sleep? I hope you are well. Good morning, replied Cindy, seeing Davis approaching her. To my surprise, I have slept in so many years, she laughed. A man was walking through the garden with his daughter. He was carrying the girl in his arms. As soon as Jordan approached Cindy, the girl stretched out her arms to her. The guest froze in shock. The woman did not know what to do, But then instinctively, she took the little girl in her arms. The little girl smiled happily. "Amelia thinks you're her mom." Davis smiled. "You look like Lara, like 2 drops of water." Maybe she feels it intuitively, because her mother died in childbirth. "You know, I'm so sick of this story." The guest looked at him. "That I am ready to find out if I really have relatives in Italy. I'll tell you the truth, if they show up later, I will not survive another trip here." She laughed. "Is it really that bad?" The man asked her with interest. "It's different for you, I would say," she answered. "Everything here is very strange for me. I feel threatened all the time." "But that's true," sighed the host. "Everything here is so unpredictable that you don't know what or who will be waiting for you at the next turn. You with your European mentality, it is difficult to understand such a thing. But for us, it is already a habitual way of life. I have a very good lawyer in Italy," looked at Davis, Cindy. "I'd like to hire him to look into this whole thing." "Cindy." The first time the host addressed the guest by her first name. "Since I'm the one who started all this, let me pay for your lawyer." The woman looked at him in bewilderment. She thought that Italians are really unpredictable people. You just don't know what to expect from them. But she liked Davis's generosity very much. "Good," the woman replied and looked lovingly at the girl. She hugged her and laughed, looking into Cindy's eyes. "Amelia, let's leave Auntie alone." Took the child in his arms, Jordan. "Let Auntie walk around the garden. I'll be waiting for you in about 20 minutes for breakfast." The girl did not want to leave Cindy, and she began to cry. Now and then she turned back and held out her arms. "I am completely broken and out of sorts." Cindy said, "This whole thing will probably never end." The woman dialed Jack's number and warned him that she needed to stay in Italy for a few more days. Then dialed the number of the lawyer. "Matthew?" She said, "It's Cindy for you. Could we meet with you? Unfortunately, my story with Italy isn't over, and I'd like to hire you for a case." "Cindy?" the lawyer said in astonishment. "I thought you had already left." "Yes, I'm listening." Toward lunchtime, Matthew was already at the gates of the Davis house. The man was very nervous. He knew what kind of man he was. Working with people of this caliber was not only a matter of honor for him, but it promised to broaden his horizons considerably. "Good evening, Matthew." Cindy greeted the lawyer. "Do you know the owner of the house?" "Jordan Davis." The man extended his hand to the lawyer. "It's a pleasure to meet you, and I look forward to your help. Nice to meet you too." The man shook his hand. "I'm willing to do whatever I can for you." "That's good. Let's go into the living room and talk," Jordan suggested. The host led the guests into a spacious room where they could sit down comfortably and talk normally. Not to say that Davis' leg was already moving well, but after a few injections he could walk painlessly. The man walked over to the table and picked up some papers and pictures. "Cindy, may I begin?" Davis asked the woman. "And you'll tell your story later?" "So, you might say, exactly 1 year ago, my wife died in childbirth. It was no surprise to either of us. The attending physician, Lara, that was my wife's name. I was warned when she was 7 months pregnant that she had a very rare disease. The choice was difficult, either have an abortion and lose the baby forever, or my wife was more likely to die in childbirth. Lara chose the life of the baby. Yesterday, as I was returning from the cemetery, I saw my wife sitting behind the wheel of the car. Naturally, I started yelling at her. I ran towards her, and she ran me down a bit, so to speak. But what was my surprise when Lara started to deny everything? I asked her to take me home. Walking was really hurting me. I hoped that when my wife saw our daughter, she would take pity on us and finally confess everything. But it didn't happen, because it wasn't Laura standing in front of me, it was Cindy. I didn't want to believe it for a long time, but it finally dawned on me that I was talking to a completely different person. These are pictures of my wife. They do look exactly alike. The lawyer looked at Cindy and Lara. So now you want to know if there is any relation between them? Yes, replied the landlord briefly. Now I will tell you everything I know about my wife. I met Lara at the gas station where she worked. So one day I saw that her face was broken. As it turned out, she had an alcoholic husband, but that wasn't what confused me. I was shocked when I found out that Lara, the mother, had sold her daughter to some man for a bottle. A few days later, she drunkenly burned down her house and burned herself in it. Lara had nowhere to go, so she lived with her rapist husband, who was more than 25 years older than her. Or rather, officially, Eric wasn't her husband. He turned out to be her roommate. Then, when we were already married, Lara told me that at first her mother didn't drink, but she was always living with one man or another. The girl was always afraid of them all. She didn't have any good memories of her past life. Cindy was shocked. She had the impression that in Italy everyone drinks. The woman couldn't believe that such a thing was possible. Of course, in America, there were sometimes such stories, but they were not, as here, at every turn. Matthew? After a long pause, Davis said to Cindy, "You've been dealing with my father's old house. Surely you must know something about it. Could you tell us about it?" "Cindy," sighed the lawyer, "I don't think we'll have any trouble finding out, but right now I can tell you that your father had a half-sister, not a sibling. When I looked into your case, I discovered that Lucy was the daughter of your father's stepfather. So those people, Paul and Lisa, have nothing to do with you. I'll be honest with you, I was devious at the time, and it's my fault. You know, I have no regrets." The woman reassured him. "I don't really need this house, especially my father never wanted to come back here. I don't think he even thought about this house." "Okay, can you give me a few days, please? I need to do some paperwork," the lawyer asked. "I don't think there's any criminality involved, so this will all be easy to figure out. Just in case, I would advise you, Cindy, to do a DNA test with your daughter Jordan. It can immediately confirm or deny your relationship. Cindy, if you don't mind, we could do it tomorrow morning." The host suggested it. "I'll take a week off work. My guys can handle it without me." The lawyer asked a few more questions, gathered the information he needed, and left. Matthew refused to take money for the work, citing the fact that Cindy had already paid him for it, but Davis insisted that he would receive full compensation for the work done. What a stroke of luck! The lawyer rejoiced. This American woman brought me such luck. Who would have thought that from the most mediocre lawyer without connections, I will work for Davis? He promised me so much money for the job that it would cover all my annual expenses. Matthew couldn't get over it. It was a rainy October day when a strange man appeared at the wicket gate. His voice was husky. The boy cast a glance at his hands, which were cupped. "I'm here to see Miranda," he said dryly. "Is that your mother?" "Call her for me," ordered the man and waved his hand at someone. A girl, a teenager of about 16 years old, appeared from somewhere. She walked up defiantly and raised her head. "Mom, there's someone there to see you." The son came into the house. There's a man and a girl. The boy, who was 10 years old at the time, watched with interest what was happening outside. The window in the kitchen was big, and through it he could see everything. At first his mother looked at the stranger with surprise. He was telling her something, waving his arms. Then she hugged him, and they all went into the house. "We will live at your place for now," the guest said. "Then I'll earn money, and we'll buy a big house. Harry, this is Uncle Charles." The mother turned to her son. "He will live with us now, and the girl's name is Lucy. She will be your sister." The boy did not like the guests very much. Uncle Charles had a wolfish look, and Lucy was always smiling achidically. Harry had lived with his mother for many years. He did not know his father. There was a rumor in the village that his mother had gone off with the farm director when he was 18. Of course, the boy saw some uncle coming to his mother's house, sometimes at night. As he grew older, he began to notice that these uncles changed, but what happened that day left an imprint on the child's entire life. From the very beginning, Lucy, Uncle Charles' daughter, began to set him up. She kept making up made-up stories. Uncle Charles scolded him at first, but one day he couldn't stand it and spanked the child with a belt, so much so that he couldn't sit down for a week. "Charles, why did you do that?" "I was arguing with Miranda's roommate. Harry's a good boy." "If he was a good boy, he wouldn't have done this to my daughter." He looked angrily at the woman, a devilish twinkle in his eye. As time passed, the beatings became more frequent. Lucy was devising more and more insidious plans. "Do you hear that?" Charles grabbed Miranda by the scruff of the neck. "Don't you realize who's boss?" That day, for the first time, Harry's mother got it in for him. From that moment on, Charles began to drink more and more, and he forced the boy's mother to drink. "Mom, why don't we run away from him?" One day the son suggested to his mother, "We'll hide and he won't find us." "Harry, what are you doing?" The drunken mother laughed. "He's my husband. I can't do without Charles." When Harry turned 16, he ran away from home. At first he hid in abandoned houses. Then he took a job as a shepherd for the season and lived in an abandoned house in a field. By the age of 18, he managed to raise some money, made himself a passport, and went to work in the city. A year later, he heard rumors that Charles had slaughtered his mother in a drunken outburst. He was locked up again. Lucy stayed at Harry's house. The guy decided to leave his past life behind once and for all, so he never even claimed his house or any other property. Harry was a hard worker. That's what the guy had decided for himself. The only thing that could help him get ahead was his hands. He had no education, of course. In town, he worked in a factory for a few years. Things began to go uphill. The guy was able to buy himself 5 kilometers from Verona housing. It was without special amenities, but his own. One spring, Harry was walking in the park after work. He was about 24 at the time. He was attracted by someone's voice. A girl was selling ice cream, and she was soliciting customers in a variety of ways. "The best ice cream in Verona," the girl shouted. "Before there's a line, come on over." "What kind of ice cream do you have?" the boy asked the perky saleswoman. "Plombard Eskimo?" "Whatever you want," she laughed. "Here you have Eskimo, and this is a very tasty strawberry cone. There is also with condensed milk and chocolate filling." "Wow," Harry smiled. "You've stumped me. I don't even know what to choose, so let's go with your flavor." "Banana ice cream with chocolate chunks, then." She gave the ice cream to the customer. "It's delicious." "Sorry, but at this price, you can't eat it every day." The customer sighed. "What do you want?" "What's cheap now?" With annoyance in her voice, she replied, "I have such a salary at this job that I can barely make ends meet. And here, if you're from the village and have no education, you can't get anywhere else." "Where are you from?" Harry asked her with interest. "I'm from Verona, and I'm from Cremona," the sales girl replied. "Susan." She extended her hand to the guy. The young people talked, but then, as luck would have it, a crowd of people gathered for ice cream, and Harry said goodbye to Susan and left. The next time they met was about 2 weeks later. Harry approached the girl. "How are you doing? How's work?" he asked. "Can I buy you an ice cream?" he suddenly offered. "I don't mind." The sales girl was happy. "Then I'll have my favorite banana ice cream and you. And today, I want to try the one with chocolate filling." The customer chose one. The young people were happy, eating ice cream and cheerfully discussing some business. Word of mouth, and Harry invited Susan for a weekend in a cafe. The girl was embarrassed at first, but then agreed. A couple weeks later, the guy asked her out. They didn't have a wedding. Harry and Susan just signed and began to live in his small house. There was one room and a kitchen and a toilet outside. You could probably get 200 or 300 acres of weeds out of the ground for a vegetable garden. "Susan, it's all right. We'll earn a little money and buy ourselves a nice house," Harry told his wife. And for the first few years everything was fine. But as time went on, Susan got tired of working as a saleswoman and was attracted to city life. "Harry, how can I walk around town in this?" The girl was indignant, looking at herself in the mirror. "It should have been in a landfill a long time ago." "Susan, be patient," her husband soothed her. "In a year, we will buy a new house, and there you can choose any clothes you want." "I want to dress well when I am still young, not when I turn into a wrinkled old woman," the wife persisted. Harry pushed on and took on the night jobs. He was tired, but Susan was always finding new reasons to stay at home after she stopped working. "You think it's easy?" She used to say to Harry. "I went to the interview today and the director said, for the first 3 months, you'll be paid half as much. It'll be your internship." "What do I need them for?" "Susan, you have to start somewhere," her husband reassured her. "Try it with this one, gain experience, and then you'll be able to set your own terms." "Well, here we go," disgruntled wife replied. Let them work themselves for such a salary. The situation worsened when Susan became pregnant. The girl was not only constantly cranky, she became simply unbearable. "I don't want those children." In a rage, she shouted, cursing her huge belly. "Why I married you? You ruined my life." "Susan, what are you doing?" Her husband asked in shock. "After all, these are our children." "I don't want them." "Throwing dishes off the table," she shouted. "If you want them, you have them." Harry tiredly picked up the dishes from the floor. They had just recently moved into a nice new house, and it had become known that Susan was pregnant. But the girl started to go crazy after that. She didn't want children. "It's all because of you," she sobbed. "I told you let's have an abortion. No, you insisted on these children, and what am I supposed to do now?" Harry didn't understand what was happening to his wife. She'd gone from what he thought was a kind girl to a monster. After Susan had given birth to the twins, she'd had no love for them from the very first minute. Harry was so tired after work, and also dealt with the children in the evening, it often seemed to him that he just could not stand it, and somewhere will drop dead. But Susan was not embarrassed. When the girls were 8 months old, the girl began to disappear in the evenings. She left the babies for her husband on various pretexts and came back at 2 a.m. Susan was not at all embarrassed. "Susan, are you completely crazy?" The husband was angry. "Where are you wandering around at night? You have little children, and you? What about me?" Angrily, she answered her husband. "I just want to live normally, and in fact, I'm filing for divorce." "What do you mean?" He looked at the girl in shock. "You want us to divorce?" "Yes," she answered briefly. "I don't love you, and I don't love your children either." Susan had a lover who she thought was a very powerful man. In fact, he was just a police officer. He was married, but in her dreams he had serious plans for her. John was an expert at this sort of thing. He'd thought it all through. "Susan, if you divorce him and leave him the children, then you will be left with nothing," he told his mistress. "I don't need anything from him." She hugged the man. "The main thing is to have you by my side. Let them choke on the children and this house. Do you realize that under the law, he not only can leave the property to himself, but also hang on you alimony? He may not work with the kids until they're 3 and stay home, but then you'll have to feed the kids. And since there are 2 of them, it's 25% of your official income. So even though I leave everything to him, I still have to pay him money?" The girl asked in shock. "That's what I'm talking about. You let's not boil. Everything here needs to be thought over." Seriously looked at her John. "So what? You'll help me with the money, right?" The girl didn't give up. "Susan, well, I will pay alimony for you. But who will pay alimony for my children if I divorce my wife?" "You?" Angry at Susan's stupidity, John. "It's a vicious cycle." She burst into tears. "What am I supposed to do now?" "Keep 1 child for yourself." "Answer the man. If anything, I'll cover for you, so you'll get the house. That way he can't file for child support or take your house away from you. If he makes a move, I'll talk to him." Harry did make a move, and John had a serious talk with him. "Look, I've got a fake case to pin on you, but this way it's a piece of cake," he told him. "So take your daughter and get the hell out of here." Harry did not know what to do. He had already accepted that he would not live with his wife, but where to go with a small child, the man could not even guess. Besides, he understood that Susan did not like his children, so he wanted to take the second child for himself. "Harry, you're a good guy." His boss once told him when he was going through divorce proceedings. "But my advice to you, get out of here. They won't let you live." "Lion, where am I going?" Through tears said the guy. "I have nothing. I lost everything. All the money I earned, I invested in a new house, and now they took it away from me. And I'm afraid for my second daughter. I don't want Susan to put her in an orphanage. She hates Lara. Listen, my nephew just went to America to pick apples. I'll give him a call and ask him about it." The gov suggested it. "Maybe there's more people needed over there." "What about Cindy?" The boy asked excitedly. "Where am I going to put my daughter?" "I'll never leave her." "You'll go with your daughter, and there you'll ask the owners, explain everything to them." "Are they not human or what?" Liam suggested. A day later, the man called Harry. His nephew agreed to help. He arranged a visa through the owners and got permission to bring the minor child. Susan, without looking, signed the document and sent her ex-husband and daughter to hell. The guy was very afraid that his daughter would be taken away from him in America, but as soon as he confessed everything to his host Matthew, the man was just in complete shock. He not only hired the boy, he sheltered him. The girl was loved by everyone. A few years later, Hannah, the daughter of the owner, confessed to Harry in love. The woman was much older than him, but she felt a sincere warmth for him. Matthew, her father, was fine with this, and Harry became a full member of their family. Before he married Hannah, he had warned the woman that he wanted to take his second daughter to America as well. Hannah agreed to this. Moreover, she and her husband beat back numerous thresholds, but the girl was never allowed out of Italy. She had a mother, who at that time worked and provided for her child. Also, Susan had a house. Italy did not allow the child to be taken from the mother in favor of the father. "Harry, love, we did the best we could. Maybe that's the way it should be. I realize I need to let it all go." He hugged his wife. "But my heart still aches for Lara." And Harry had good reasons for that, although the man knew nothing about his wife and daughter, but the weight on his heart concealed what was really going on. Not 2 years later, Susan was abandoned by her policeman. Of course, John was not going to marry her. The girl was left alone with a small child in her arms. Her hatred for her ex-husband and her daughter only intensified. "It's all because of you." Susan threw everything she could get her hands on. "You ruined my whole life." She shouted to someone in the distance. "If it weren't for you, I'd be happy now, and I wouldn't have to feed your child." But Susan was afraid to give her daughter to an orphanage. The girl thought that then her house could be taken away from her, and she was not going to return to her village. Susan actively searched for a girl with a trailer, but no one was interested in her. Dysfunctional men were hitting on her. Finally, Susan decided on one. The main thing that he worked and fed her daughter, she decided then, and the rest I'll take care of myself. So in her house, first there was one Alki. He even officially married Susan and gave his patronymic and surname to her daughter, then another, then a third. The girl changed men like gloves, but no one from such a contingent, her needs were not satisfied. Susan herself did not notice how at the communal table she began to pour herself more and more often. At first it was innocent fun, but the woman did not even notice the moment she crossed the boundary and began to look for drinking companions. Lara was getting older and older. The girl in despair tried several times to escape from the house, but there was nowhere to go, and she returned to this hell. "Mom," sobbing daughter, "I beg you, stop it. Let's live normally." "Fuck off," answered her drunken mother. "You ruined my whole life. How I hate you." But the worst was ahead for Lara. The girl let her mother go only when she sold her for a bottle of vodka. From that moment, Lara had no mother anymore. Due to constant stress on the background of fears, the girl eventually developed a very rare syndrome. Pregnancy, her condition deteriorated sharply. The next morning, Jordan with her daughter and Cindy went to the lab for a DNA test. "Cindy, for what it's worth, I wouldn't want you to have a negative impression of Italy," said Davis as they left the lab. "So I suggest you take a drive around our area. You up for it?" "Let's do it." The woman agreed. "It's a lot of pressure to wait anyway. It would be better for us to distract ourselves. Then I suggest we take a walk in the upper park. It's beautiful there. And go to the rivers. They have such beautiful views." Jordan smiled. "I'm not much of a guide, but I'll tell you something." The car stopped in the parking lot near the upper park. Davis was driving today, so he asked Cindy to hold Amelia. The little girl was a little cranky and quickly fell asleep. The woman looked down at her with pleasure, her face brightening. Jordan got out of the car and retrieved the stroller in which Cindy had placed the little girl. They strolled happily through the park, talking about business, about markets. My step-grandfather was originally aimed at fruits for middle-class exports, and above, the econo never interested him. A woman told me, "Is it easy?" "No. Now that I'm doing it all myself, I'd say it's very difficult. We position our apple as an eco-product, so we have to meet the highest standards." "I understand," the man replied, "but we don't have many people willing to pay for a good product," he sighed. "Or rather, I would say that only the middle class can afford it, and in Italy, there are not so many of them. As an entrepreneur, I can safely say that I wouldn't make much money from an eco-product. I would have to lie that I have juice from gardens and fields that are not treated with chemicals, or I would have to reduce my production because at such an inflated price for eco-juice, my product would simply not sell in such quantities. If you look at the gardens that grow in Verona, they are far from being organic gardens. They use chemicals at all stages of agitation. I can safely say that we are not ready for this transition yet. You know, the demand for organic products has probably increased in the last 10 years. Cindy continued the conversation. And I don't want to lie, but for example, Scandinavian countries, Germany, France are now focused on organic products, so it's easy to work with them. But if you go to the market in America, you will find cheap apples or pears grown using, so to speak, traditional methods. And there is nothing wrong with that. That's the way it should be. The population has different layers. For one reason or another, not everyone can buy healthy products. But there are those who are ready, so you are also benefiting as we are. You supply a certain part of the population with your products. It would be much worse if those people couldn't buy any juices at all. So you don't think there's any contradiction in that? Davis looked at the woman with interest. Why should there be? She smiled. Perhaps in 50 years there will be such technologies that will allow us to grow any product without chemistry. Then it will become natural, but right now we have to think about what opportunities are available to different segments of people. Jordan really liked the way Cindy looked at these things. There was a sense of reasonableness in her. She didn't categorize everything as good or bad. The woman tried to find a middle way, so to speak, in everything. This was the first time Davis had encountered such a thing, and the man liked the approach very much. Cindy rolled the stroller with pleasure. She glanced now and then at the sleeping girl. God, we're like a family. She smiled to herself. Who would have thought that all this would happen to me? I'm starting to feel different here now. Maybe that's the beauty of Italy. You go through a lot of stress at first, and it's only when you get hit over the head that you start to notice the really important things. After the park, Davis took his guest to the river. He showed the woman the most beautiful places. Amelia was already awake and sat in Cindy's arms, taking the most active part in their walk. But by 1 o'clock the girl was hungry. She was no longer satisfied with what her father had taken for her. Well, Amelia, let's go home. Stroke the child on the head, father. We need to feed you properly, and we're hungry too. Right, Cindy? The woman nodded her head and smiled. The tension inside her was easing. Cindy was feeling better, and the baby was taking up almost all of her attention. The woman didn't even want to let her out of her arms. God, I must be out of my mind, she thought to herself. But now I feel what it means to have a child. The woman smiled. For the remaining 3 days, Davis and her guest took in the other sights of the city of Verona and beyond. They talked all the time. There seemed to be no topic that the man and woman could not discuss. Cindy felt very at ease with this man. It was as if Davis and his young daughter had become an integral part of her life. Who would have thought it would happen like this? Jordan thought to himself, Cindy and Lara seemed to be the same person, but they were so different. But in spite of that, I like the woman very much. I can be friends with her. She doesn't like falseness, and that's very good. Finally, the day came when the lawyer called. He asked Cindy to pick up the DNA test tomorrow, but not to open it yet. Let's do it together, and then I'll tell you all about it. Matthew suggested. It was evening. Davis and his guest were having dinner. The man glanced curiously at the woman every now and then. You know, Jordan, I'm so nervous. My hands are shaking. She said to the man. In any case, everything will be fine, he smiled. We'll have a chance to learn about your past, and then you can decide what you want to do with it. Perhaps you will choose to forget it. I still can't believe this is happening to me. Cindy sighed. It's just unbelievable. Well, if your roots are from here, it's to be expected, Davis replied. You're the first generation of your family in America, and if you look at all this, you can see how many of your relatives might live in Italy. I never even thought of that. Cindy looked at him. Of course I have relatives here, that's obvious, but I didn't particularly want to know anything about them. That's why it all came as such a big surprise to me. First, my lawyer told me that my father happened to have a sister here, and then it turned out that I had a cousin and a cousin as well. That night, Cindy didn't sleep much. She kept thinking that tomorrow she would finally find out the whole truth. "Are we ready?" asked the lawyer when they were all gathered at the hotel. "Cindy, please open the test." The woman's hands were shaking so much that she could barely manage this simple task. Cindy opened the results and froze in shock, Davis staring at her in amazement. "So Amelia is my niece." She barely spoke and covered her face with her hands and cried. Jordan did not believe her words and took the test from Cindy. He immediately turned pale. Of course, they both thought it was a possibility, but neither of them fully believed it. "So, you, Cindy, and Lara were twin sisters." The lawyer began his story. "Let me tell you right off the bat, your father's life was very difficult. His mother drank, his stepfather constantly beat the boy, but then when Harry married and he and Susan, that was your mother's name, had children, his wife began to walk away from him. She hated her daughters, you and Lara. Your mother took everything from your father, and she was afraid to give up her second daughter. Susan led a life of debauchery, so by the time she was 40, she was a drunk." "Oh my God, that's awful." Cindy couldn't take it anymore and cried. "How could you not love your children like that?" After the lawyer left, Cindy could not calm down for a long time. She walked over to Davis. "Jordan, you'll forgive me, but I'd better leave," said the woman. "I need time to think about this and accept it." "I understand," the man replied grudgingly. "Cindy, Amelia and I will be waiting for you at any time." He hugged her goodbye. "Jack, where are you?" shouted Cindy, walking from one apple alley to another. "Did you go to the old swing?" The woman saw an elderly man with a little girl in his arms. He was gently placing her on a makeshift swing. "Like this." The gardener held the girl. "Well, do you like it? I'm going to take you for a ride." Cindy stood and watched as Jack lovingly handled her daughter. She couldn't take it anymore and went over to him. "I love you so much." She wept. "You've done so much for me, and now Amelia's in your arms all the time." "Well, not in yours." He laughed, looking at Cindy, a huge belly. "That's why I'm a grandfather. Your husband is always busy. He doesn't have time for you yet." After Cindy returned home to America, she soon realized that she not only cared for her niece, but also for her father. Davis was experiencing the same thing. After a month, he couldn't stand it and flew to visit Cindy in America. Jack took an immediate liking to the man. After another 3 months, Jordan and Cindy married. The man immediately decided that he had already tried to make things happen in his niche in Italy, but new opportunities were opening up for him in America. He sold his factory in Verona and opened a high-end juice factory, not far from Cindy's gardens. So now they were the largest exporters, not only of apples, but also of all-natural eco-juice. Despite the fact that the man initially had difficulties with language, he quickly got along with people, and the workers loved him for it. "He looks a bit like our old owner Matthew," they whispered, "only he's much easier to work with." A year and a half later, to their surprise, Cindy got pregnant and Jordan was over the moon. But when the doctor told them that the couple would have twins, 2 boys, the parents almost went crazy with joy. "It's okay, Cindy, be patient." Jack hugged his favorite. "Soon your boys will come, the real hares, so I will carry them in my arms and ride on this swing." The woman kissed her daughter and slowly walked to the beginning of the orchard. She stopped at a single apple tree, the trees now abundant with purpose. Cindy closed her eyes and enjoyed their sweet fragrance. What a pity Daddy didn't live to see these days, ran through her mind. If he had been alive, though, I wouldn't have had to go to Italy. I wouldn't have met Jordan and Amelia. Perhaps my dad gave me the best gift I've ever gotten in my life, so I am very grateful to him and to Italy. The woman noticed multicolored ribbons developing in the distance. Cindy stroked her large belly and slowly headed for the exit. Before getting into her car, she looked at her garden once more. "How much do I love you?" she pronounced, looking at the trees. "If there were no you, there would be no me. You created the Cindy I know."